So I'd like to call to order the March 9th, 2020 Planning Board meeting, and Reggie has so graciously assigned to do the invocation, so thank you very much.
Everybody bow your heads. Father God, thank you for another day and the ability to serve the town of Apex. Continue to bless the town and give us guidance and wisdom in the decisions made impacting the town. We ask these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any items of information today?
Yes, so we are right in the midst of Census 2020. The letters will be mailed to every address between March 12th and 20th, and on that communication there is an ID code that folks can use to go to the census website to fill out their census. And so encourage everybody to do that. And then the other thing is we are going to be getting yard signs that say Wake Counts Census 2020 on them, and they will be placed throughout our community in the next week or so. I'm picking those up on Thursday, so you'll start seeing those out as well.
Just on intersections or in people's yards? And
you'll see them along main corridors and areas that are traditionally have lower counts. And then you may have noticed there's a banner across Salem Street also, and a display downstairs. And then our next item, if I may, will be the special presentation. So I just wanted to introduce our senior zoning compliance officer, Mark Seibert. He is also a certified arborist, and I had asked him in honor of it being March and Arbor Day month, I asked him to come and speak to you about tree planting and pruning. All right, thanks, Mark.
All right.
Right. So again, I'm Mark Seibert, Senior Zoning Compliance Officer, International Society of Arboriculture, Certified Arborist and Municipal Specialist. And so we'll be talking about tree planting, pruning, crepe myrtle pruning, and gloomy scale, and then a little blurb on Arbor Day coming up next week. So I'll be talking mainly about containerized trees in this tree planting. But I'll try to throw in there the balled and burlap, things that might be different for those. And if you have any questions throughout it, just go ahead and answer or ask them anytime, and I'll try to do the best I can answering those.
Is this presentation on the website anywhere?
We can certainly make it available. I don't know.
It's not currently, but we will make it available.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you want to start with a good quality tree, one that's not too big for this container. We look for a central leader in our trees that is good structure. We'll talk more about structure and pruning a little bit later, but no major wounds on the tree, any damage on the trunks. Once you get the top, you look at the bottom with the roots. You can see some in this picture, a girdling root, which is a root that was in when the tree was in a smaller pot. It hit the side and it just continued to grow around the side, and then when they put it up in a bigger pot, they didn't cut those roots, and so then it did it again on the next pot. And so that root, you couldn't cut it, it would kill the tree, so you need to get rid of those trees. The far picture here shows the tree, this one bending, and this one the whole tree just leans. So it shows that the roots are not well formed in that pot. So if you could shake the tree a little bit and it wants to bend over, that's good. Just slides right out. There's no roots there, and you want to, again, cull that one and not take that one for planting. So transporting these trees, whether you're doing it yourself or you're having a contractor do it, you want to wrap them up with a tarp or enclosed trailer, wrap the trunks. If you're putting them on the edge of a tailgate, you don't want those rubbing against the tailgate and knocking the bark off. For planting, you want to do twice as wide and just as deep as the root ball. Sometimes if you're doing a balled and burlap, they are triangular, so you'll have a hole that matches your root ball. But you don't want it any deeper because you don't want it to settle and sink down, because we want to have those roots right at the top. In North Carolina here, you do have a lot more clay, and so you might need to amend some soil with some peat moss organic material to help break up that clay. If it's really bad, you're talking a large scale excavation, because if you just do it right around the hole, in a year, your roots have grown outside of that space, and so you're back into the clay. Looking for girdling roots, or when you start to plant, when you take it out of the pot again, you might not see any from the top up here, but down on the side, these are minimal, so we can cut those. And so what we do is you take a shovel and slice down the edge of the root ball. And so you're cutting off just the outer layer all the way around that root ball. You can see a couple of the smaller ones here. If they're really large, again, you might want to consider culling the tree, which means not using it, throwing it away. But there's a lot of different types of containers, bags, pots, mesh, anything that's not organic, you need to get rid of it. So balled and burlap, if it's synthetic burlap, get rid of that, take it off. If it's natural, you can leave it on there, probably remove it around the trunk when you finish planting. The wire basket, we'll get that to when we finish it up, but you can leave most of that on there.
So Mark, just
Yep.
to clarify, so you're saying to cut off the sides there if they're
Yes.
on together? I didn't know that. I normally try to loosen them up.
Yeah,
But
so,
now we
yeah,
cut them off.
pretty much, some people put the tree in the hole, so then it's more stable, and just, if you have like a square 4-inch shovel, and you just go straight down, but you can do a round point shovel, but yeah, you just want to take a one coat all the way to the outside. If there's not any roots showing there, you don't necessarily need to do it, but don't worry about, you can be aggressive with it. It'll survive. It'll survive.
I was never-
I've cut plenty of roots, and you don't have to worry about. You can kind of figure out that point where if you cut too much, it's not going to live. But yeah, so it's just a mat there. If they're really thick, starting to get bigger than your finger, then you might want to get concerned.
Thank you.
So you put the tree in the hole, make sure it's centered. I like to backfill with water as I'm putting the soil back in. Again, with the clay soils, that could get a little messy if you got too much clay. But then we start putting a ring around it. You want to put that right at the outside of the root ball, so the water fills the whole space where the root ball is. If you have it in too close, then the whole root ball isn't getting water. It's just going to get where the berm is. And if it's too far, you're kind of wasting that water on the outside. And this is where I would remove the top of the basket, if it's balled and burlap, the wire basket, because usually you'll probably use that to help plant a tree with a machine, a bucket, and so getting that in the hole helps to have the hooks on that wire. But then cut the first ring off, so then any roots that are growing on top aren't girdled. And then we typically put a black plastic, like the downspout black pipe. Just cut that, put it around there, helps protect from weed eaters, mowers. If it's in your yard, obviously you have more control of people mowing, but planting in parks, you never know who might be mowing at the time, and so we just a little bit more precaution there. Mulch, just a thin layer of mulch, very light on top of the root ball here, and nothing up against the bark, because that can promote rot of the trunk. Water, again, this is going to depend what time of year you're planting it. Planting right now, you don't have to probably water every day, but if you're in the summer, water every day, and then kind of wean that off over a couple weeks and months. And then any dry spells, if the spring comes up and it's starting to leaf out and it's a dry spell, probably want to add a little bit more water to that as needed. So that's finishing up anything on planting. Any questions on that? Okay. Pruning. So there's a lot of different ways or reasons why we prune. Clearing for sidewalks or any obstructions, dead limbs, kind of eliminating fruit or undesirable characteristics of the tree. Then you're getting into the structural defects or strong structure, to promote strong structure. And so that's pretty much what the next couple of slides are. I've borrowed them from Ed Gilman, from a retired professor from the University of Florida, who kind of pioneered the structural pruning techniques. And so kind of what the idea of structural pruning is to get a central leader, which is one main branch or one stem from the tree. And not all species allows for that. Some are kind of multi-stem, but for the most part, central leader. And so if you kind of look out either side here with the magnolia trees, we're 20 feet up in the air, but there's one trunk. And so that's what we're looking for, trees that will eventually keep going with that structure. So when you start with a small tree, we want to identify the lowest permanent branch. And so that depends on where you're planting the tree, what height that's going to be. If it's in your yard, maybe 6 feet is good. You're not going to hit it when you're mowing. If it's by the road, 12, 14 feet. So when you plant a tree, sometimes that branch isn't even on the tree yet. So that means that all the branches on the side of that tree are temporary and will be cut off. And so we want to keep those limbs small so that when you do cut them off on the trunk, they have a small diameter, which then reduces the size of the wound that we put on the trunk for it to heal over. If you just let them grow really long, you cut them off, bigger wound, longer time. And so again, suppress any growth that are included bark, which is where the narrow angles of the branch attachment. And so that included bark creates a weak joint in the tree, and we've got a couple more slides to illustrate that coming up. So in this is a live oak with 3 main stems, all kind of originating from the same spot, which in the future would be a weak point. So we want to reduce the 2 on the sides, which you can see here's the one cut and there's the other cut. You could continue probably pruning a little bit more just by taking a little bit off the ones here, because what's going to happen is those are going to want to continue to grow out as well, but we want to reduce the size of all these branches when it meets the trunk. So then when you do take them off in the future, a year or two later, they won't be as big. And so you say, what happens if you don't prune those off? Well, this is what happens. So this is about a 40-inch live oak with 3 codominants at about 6 feet. And that whole area that is black here is just where the 2 barks were touching. So there's no connective tissue between the 2 barks, and they're actually pushing against each other, pushing away. So this side's putting on bark, and this side's putting on and pushing, and you get a big storm, and they break. And live oaks are really strong, so even though they're really strong, if you got a weak joint, it doesn't matter. So when you do make the cuts, this is kind of shows you how and where to make the proper cuts. So we have the branch bark ridge, which is right here, is where the trunk and the branch meet, kind of pushing up a little bit of bark. There's a little sunken area where the collar is. And so we go over here and it shows you kind of where you want to make that cut. So if you cut in here, you're going to get into the collar and it's going to have a oval shape when it heals. The top and the bottom will heal correctly, but the sides won't, and it's kind of oblong shape. It should be a perfect circle. You can kind of see down here where there was a perfect one and healed up completely. To make the cut, the 1, 2, 3 steps, you identify the branch, you come out about a foot, make an undercut, and then go out a little bit on the second cut, and the limb will break at that point. Again, there's a limit on how big a limb you're cutting, but usually it's a couple inches. You don't have a lot of weight. The reason you do cut it off is so it doesn't rip. If you just started cutting down, it'd rip all the way down the trunk, and then our wound is really big. But here, you see how a nice, perfect circle, and then the wound would follow suit as well. Don't leave stubs. Stubs are a pet peeve of mine, so a lot of people would just come and cut right there, one cut, and leave the stub, and then it just goes in from there. So here we're going to talk a little bit about topping. This is an example, not in Apex or even Wake County, but in North Carolina. So this is a Google Street View from August 2012. You see a nice full canopy on a couple large oak trees. In March of 16, you see they've pruned them, I'm guessing probably 2 years ago, so probably in 2014. They removed the one tree in the front there, but all the other ones they topped and cut back. And so at each one of those points, a mass of sprouts came, and they're very weakly attached. So ice storm, they rip out very easily. They've created more of a headache on, we'll see the next photo here. They used to, on the first video, or shot here, they got it pretty much limbed up above the house there, the roof of the house. Now, they have a lot of growth down covering up the house. So I'm not sure what they were going for, and when they did this. And then if you go by it today, the canopy's pretty close to where it was 6 years ago when they cut it. So they've disfigured the tree, made it weaker, spent a lot of money to have someone do that. But again, we have 8 good reasons not to top from the Arbor Day Foundation, but you're removing a lot of stored nutrients from the tree. You're making big wounds in the tree for disease and insects. Again, the weak limbs that are grow from that point. Some trees can't tolerate severe pruning like that, but just the ugliness you've taken away, what took hundreds, maybe years to do, and just disfigured it. So we definitely don't like topping, and usually you can get a good certified arborist, and so this is the website that you can go to check a certification. So if someone tells you, oh, I'm a certified arborist, you can go in here, put their number or their name, and it'll tell you whether they're a current member or not. So definitely want to try to find a company with a certified arborist. So moving into crepe myrtle pruning, kind of that topping, moving forward into crepe myrtle. So crepe murder is kind of the process of cutting a large crepe myrtle back to some pretty big stubs. And the first year is right here at the 1 mark. They let it grow for the next year and then make a cut and let it grow one more time and then cut it once more. And then probably the next year they come back and cut it below the first mark and repeat that same cycle over and over again until then you barely have a trunk down here. A lot of people do this because, well, the neighbor did it, or somebody said you need to do that to help promote flowers, where actually it kind of delays flower for a month compared to non-pruned or murdered trees. But the best thing is to find the right cultivar, cultivated variety of the crepe myrtle that fits your space. So if the tree's too big for the space you have it, remove it and put the proper size tree back in there, because crepe myrtles are fairly low maintenance once they are established. The pruning, just limb up for any obstructions, sidewalks, yards, and then they'll continue flowering throughout the summer without much need. So, gloomy scale. Has anybody heard of gloomy scale? No. Okay. All right. So it attacks the red maples, other species, but primarily in our area the red maples. It's a little insects that attach to the branch, and then they just suck out all the nutrients from the branch. And all in the southeast. I was from Florida before here, but didn't really have a lot of issue with it down in Florida. I came up here, and definitely in the parking lots is where we see a lot of it, because the moisture or the heat in the heat island effect in those parking lots is kind of a great habitat for them, and kind of makes the population grow. And then they attack the trees, sucking the nutrients out. You have the tip dieback, which we see here, and so eventually over time it just slowly kills the tree. And so then you just want to remove that tree in this location, and there's not really a spray or anything that you can control the gloomy scale. The best is to plant in areas where in the yards or in the land or away from impervious surfaces, so you don't have the increased environment that is promotes the outburst of the gloomy scale. So we kind of promote planting in other areas and don't really allow them in the parking lots in Apex. So but kind of just providing enough water and in the best planting location is the best alternatives. So wrapping up here is our Arbor Day celebration on March 20th at 2 o'clock. Seagrove Farm Park will be partnering, the Tree Cap will be partnering with the Bee City Committee, planting 5 trees for the 5 years as a Tree City USA. So we'll be planting a mix of large trees and flowering trees to help promote the pollinator habitat. So hope to see everybody out there. But any questions about anything, planting, pruning?
What if you have a tree, maple, maybe 3 inches, and it's wide right at the base? Is that too late to?
At the base? Yeah, probably. I mean, you could cut it, but it'd be a pretty big, yeah, you probably just get a better tree, take that one out and get another one back in there, but, yeah.
So you want to do that early, or these are just naturally growing?
Yeah. It depends on where it is. You could cut it and see, and if it lives, not. Take it, But it might have been one where it was cut before and then it sprouted back up. And then, but that's the house I bought had a lot of those that the previous owner cut a bunch out, so I got a lot of sprouts coming up. You can pick 1 or 2 and let them grow, and see what happens. Yep.
How prevalent is the gloomy scale here in Texas?
Pretty prevalent, yeah. But again, mainly like in those urban areas. Yep.
So just to recap, for crepe myrtles, we're not supposed to top them?
Nope. You can prune the spent flowers, so like when they get the seed pods on, you could prune those if you could reach, obviously, the full canopy of them, and then that will help promote more growth. They're not using the energy to make seeds. They can continue flowering.
I'm going to tell my wife to come talk to you.
Okay.
You talk to some of our neighboring towns.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
This time, it's open for public comment on any items that don't appear under the public comment hearing, and since we have none today, that would be any other new business or any other comments. So does anybody wish to come forth for public comment? Seeing no one, we'll move on to consent item number 1, which were the minutes from the February 10th meeting. Has everybody read them and have any comments or changes? If not, maybe a motion to approve.
Motion approved.
I have a motion, second? I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. So, no public hearings, so Amanda, you're up on motions regarding amendments to the UDO.
Afternoon. Okay, so we have 4 amendments for you today. The first 2 are recommendations from the Planning Committee of the Town Council, and they concern this board primarily. So the first amendment, set of amendments has to do with the composition of the board and what constitutes a quorum. So to summarize, the proposal was to increase the number of voting members to 9, add 1 non-voting member from the Apex Historical Society, change the length of terms from 3 to 2 years, increase the number of terms from 3 to 4, and remove the requirement for a public hearing when removing a planning board member. So we'll go through these changes. If you have a question at any time, please feel free to ask. So starting at the beginning, the amendments start with increasing the number of members to 9. And then the next section in the UDO involves the composition of how many required members from the ETJ there are, and that's a proportional requirement based upon the total number of voting members. And basically, we're probably not going to have more than 1, given that our percentage of ETJ area is dropping. So unless we have an ETJ expansion, which isn't planned right now, our ETJ members should just be 1.
You know what that ratio is right now?
It is, you multiply, it's determined by estimating the total population in the ETJ as a percentage of the population in the town's corporate limits and the ETJ, and multiplying this percentage now by 9, the total required voting membership, and then you round up. And right now, I believe we're rounding up.
What is the percentage now?
Population of ETJ.
I don't have that number, but I know our ETJ membership is 1, and I believe we're rounding up to get to 1. So we can't have less than 1 ETJ member.
Just a little nitpick. You really shouldn't say round up to the next whole number. You should say round to the nearest whole number. Here's why. So let's say you had 90% and 10%. Then the 10% would be 0.9. You would round up to 1. But if you did 9 times 0.9, you'd get 8.1. And if you rounded up, you'd get 9. So it should be rounded to the nearest whole number, not the next whole number. You follow me?
It's fine, it's always gonna be one,
And you should get rid of the
though.
word
It's-
round up. You should just say round to the nearest whole number.
I don't care, it's half a one, I understand.
It's 6 and
for
1
another
half.
person, but for
Oh,
us,
so you're
it's-
saying
it's
this,
still
this
one.
math only applies to the ETJ?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then it's fine.
Yeah, it's all,
always gonna
If,
be
unless
one.
it got to 11%, in which case you'd be in trouble. Okay?
Yeah, we're not. So what's going on is we keep annexing land
Yeah.
and we aren't expanding our ETJ. The only time
Yeah.
we'd have to recalculate is if we ever did a big ETJ expansion, and
Okay.
I don't believe we'd be doing that.
As long as you don't think you're ever going to round up to the next whole number. If you had 1.01, rounding up to the next whole number would be 2. Just saying.
and we'd
That's
have to,
actually what state
that
law
is what
says.
state law says.
Actually what state law
Yeah, that's
Does that
the,
actually mean you
Yes.
should round from 1.01 to 2?
Yes,
Wow. Cool.
that actually is what.
Okay. All right.
okay. So outside of the person that has to live in the ETJ, the balance of the membership has to reside within the town's corporate limits except for the members referenced in the subsections that references the 2 new members that we're talking about today. So we adjust this ETJ composition, or we evaluate it basically every 2 years. That's the requirement, and that's the proposal. Basically is currently 3, but the proposal is to change this to evaluate it every 2 years so it's consistent with the terms for the planning board. So then we get to the text for the first new member, which is 1 member of the planning board shall reside outside the corporate limits and ETJ, but within the area covered by the town's 2045 land use map. So these current people are currently in Wake County's jurisdiction. But if they choose to develop their property needing to annex, tapping onto water and sewer, they would basically have to come to us and talk to us and follow our 2045 land use map. So the planning committee felt that was one reason why they should have representation on the planning board, in addition to having areas around them that are being developed under the Town of Apex standards. And then the next new section is 1 non-voting member of the planning board shall be a member of the Apex Historical Society and may reside either within or outside the town's corporate limits. And then there's clarification that this does not authorize the planning board to act as a historic preservation commission. That's a whole separate set of state legislation.
So why have a non-voting member?
So the intent is for this, if, for instance, there's a case on the agenda where there is historic property involved, then, or something of interest to the Apex Historical Society, they could come here, provide input, but they aren't, they're not a voting member, so that they're not considered in the quorum. If there happens to be nothing on the agenda, then they wouldn't have to attend, for instance. So that was the intent of that, is just to provide input and guidance.
How many members of the Historic Society now live within Apex?
I don't have that information. And, yeah. I don't even know how many members they have.
Yeah, I was about to ask about the planning committee, the same thing. It's like, oh, never mind.
Seems like if they're part of the Historical Society and they're going to be on the board, it's almost one of the town members. I don't want some outside person coming.
You can make that suggestion to town council if, that could be part of the motion if you so choose. And then next section is just to clarify, all members of the planning board except the non-voting member from the Historical Society shall have voting power on all matters of business. The next change is just somewhat of a minor change, but to the greatest extent possible, half of the membership instead of a majority of the membership should consist of persons with special training or experience in the fields listed. And this is just, the goal was to ensure that there was opportunity for perhaps more lay people without direct experience in any of these fields to participate on the board. And this has always been guidance anyway, it's not a requirement. And as far as appointments go, I think I've gone too far, let me go back. The ETJ member is always appointed by the Wake County Board of Commissioners All other members, including the new member from Wake County's jurisdiction and the Apex Historical Society, would be recommended by the mayor and appointed by the town council. So in this section, you can see a lot of strike through. Basically, we're taking out language from when the UDO was initially adopted and the creation of the planning board. It's not necessary anymore. And so this is where we find the change in terms from 3 years to 2 years, and a corresponding increase in the number of terms to 4 from 3. So basically, the maximum overall length of consecutive terms would be 8 years instead of 9.
Is there a reason to go to 2? Or was it just?
The town council, there was a comment made from planning committee that felt like a long period of time for someone to commit to a volunteer board position. It also would give the council more frequent opportunities to review the membership and appoint new members, for example.
My comment would be, sometimes it takes a year just to get rolling on the board and really understand, and then you roll off the year, you don't get that continuity. So I'm not sure why we would go to 2 versus 3.
I agree. I'm also not clear as to why the planning committee is making comments on the planning board.
Well, the planning committee of town council often provides, it acts as the committee that suggests UDO amendments. It's ultimately up to the entire town council to whether or not to make all the changes as suggested by the planning committee. And certainly if that, again, can be part of your motion, if you feel like it needs to be 3 and why it should remain as 3, you can certainly make that part of your motion.
Any other comments? We can either go through the rest of them in the discussion.
Okay.
Why don't you continue?
And so we talked about appointment terms. And then finally, well, not finally, and then with regard to removal, currently, if there's a cause to remove a planning board member, there's requirement for a public hearing, and the town council felt that wasn't necessary if there was a clear charge of neglect of duty, malfeasance, misconduct, or failure to faithfully attend, that the town council should just be able to remove said member without holding a public hearing. And then the last section for this particular amendment is to clarify that a quorum is a majority of the planning board's membership, excluding vacant seats and the non-voting member. So I don't know if you want to pull out this one separately and go ahead and discuss this one while it's fresh in your mind, or if you wanted to continue with the rest of the items before making a recommendation.
I think we should just talk about this one first.
Yes.
Okay.
Like I said, my one concern is just cutting it down to 2 years. I think having consistency over 3 years just allows a lot of consistent, where
Yep.
you're here, you've heard a lot of the cases, some of the cases come back, and you've been around and you've seen those. I'm not sure why they want to move it to 2 years.
I agree.
I agree with that.
I agree too.
I actually think that, I tried to get online, I can't from here. If the Historical Society members are all Apex residents, then we don't need to change it. But otherwise, I think somebody made the comment, and I agree, that it says they can live inside or outside the corporate limits, but it doesn't say they have to be an Apex resident. Or is that covered somewhere else in the UDO, that anybody on the planning board has to be a resident of the town of Apex?
So earlier, it states that the balance of the planning board's membership shall reside within the town's corporate limits.
Meaning not the ETJ.
Correct.
Right. But for the Historical Society, it says they can be inside or outside the corporate limits, but I think somebody else picked it up.
I think they should be.
What if they're not an Apex resident at all?
Correct.
And I don't
Yeah.
know what the requirements are to be a member of the Apex Historical Society. It might be you have to be an Apex resident. I don't know that.
I don't know that either.
So if it's true that they don't have to be an Apex resident, then I think we should add in here for that. I can't keep track of the numbers, but subsection C.
So basic,
That they must be a resident of the town of Apex and may reside either within or without. So right after it says Apex Historical Society, put,
so would reside within the town's corporate limits.
well,
I would say with,
I don't know. I don't really care if they're in the ETJ or not. I just want to make sure they're not living in Cary.
Okay.
Am I being stupid? Is
No.
it?
No?
I think
Okay.
I'd rather have them inside the corporate limits.
Okay,
I
yeah.
just think
So
it's,
I will be the naysayer
Yeah.
here. Just and I'm listening to sort of all of these arguments, and I understand wanting them to live inside corporate limits or in ETJ. However, they are a non-voting member, and
Yeah.
so my thinking is that they're coming to provide context and feedback and contribute to conversations that specifically relates to their level of expertise within the Apex Historical Society.
Yeah.
And so, while I might think that person lives in Apex, we do have an affordable housing issue. They may not live in Apex, and there are members of the town staff who are valued members of the staff who don't live within the town.
Right.
So if they were a voting member, I would absolutely want that person to be a part.
Right.
But they're just contributing to conversation. I would go with what everyone on the board says, but sort of my thinking is that if they are just contributing to the conversation and adding context, that they would not necessarily have to be a member of the community or resident of the community. And if they're bringing a perspective that the remainder of the board doesn't necessarily agree with, I think that would bear out in the conversations as well.
Sure. That's a good point.
Develops-
They're not voting, so maybe
I just
not as important as I thought.
Maybe it's a new point.
I just think they should live inside Apex if they're going to be part of the Apex Historical Society. I don't want somebody from, they could be, live in Charlotte and be a member just because of their, but
Because I will
They're not-
note that our town ambassador does not live in the town of Apex. So, I will.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on any of the other?
Do we all agree on the 3-year, 2-year thing?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So since the planning board is suggesting to town council to leave the length of term alone, do you suggest that the maximum number of terms remain unchanged as well, or do you want?
Yeah,
To-
3 times 3 is 9. That's what it is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable.
So I think we could get rid of the first sentence of that section 5 because the board's already been formed, so I don't think you need that.
Yeah.
I think it should just be
Right.
left at, members shall be appointed for terms of 3 years. And the
Can't
planning
serve
board
more.
may more than 3 consecutive.
3-year
Three-year terms.
Right.
Okay.
So in other words, you're kind of leaving that last sentence alone.
Mhm.
Or last 2 sentences would be left alone. They wouldn't
For the
be
most
changed.
part. Do you want to go ahead and take a vote on that item,
Yeah.
since we discussed some
Do you want
change?
to combine those?
Or do you want to wait?
Or do you want to have 2 separate votes?
Do we either
We can continue.
vote to deny the amendment or do we?
I think,
Pass it with-
can we have a motion to modify the amendment?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion
I don't
that
have, what section are we talking?
just this section.
It's item number 1.
Section 5.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure the best way to put it on here.
Okay, it would be,
Because it's
it's section 2.1.2B.
2.1.2B, subsection 5? Is
Yes.
But are they
to-
approving more than just that section?
Well,
I understand we're gonna modify it, but I need to know how, if we're writing them separate, I need to know how to write it.
yeah, I'm going to
It's
dictate.
212B,
Yeah, 2.1.2B.
all of the changes are under that
Subsection
section.
5.
The quorum is subsection D.
What is it, D?
But there's 2 sections being modified in item 1, 212B and 212D. The revised language that the planning board is suggesting is in 212B5.
B.
What's the title of
The title of that particular subsection is,
what is 212?
212 is planning board. 212B is membership.
2 and 2D.
quorum. Okay, so we're just going to continue on.
Well, we didn't, are we gonna have a vote on each piece? And then see if we're all agreed on every piece, in which case we only really need to send it back to council with one change, or?
So you can vote on this entire item and say, we recommend whatever, like, first example,
Yes,
approval with the exception of,
Yeah, well, except we haven't heard all of it yet. Right, got it. So maybe we should go through the whole thing, what do you think?
You want to
Chair?
go through the other amendments as
Yeah,
well?
because maybe we don't have trouble with any of the other ones.
Okay.
Then maybe it's we approve it, recommend approval except for.
okay, let's continue on then.
What was the amendment number 2?
Okay, amendment number 2 is basically for all boards listed in the UDO, which includes Planning Board, Board of Adjustment, Transit Advisory Committee, Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission, and the Apex Environmental Advisory Board. Currently, 3 of these sections specifically state that the member shall serve without compensation, and two of the groups it's silent on. And so the proposal from the Planning Committee is that a small stipend be offered for each board member as authorized by town council in the annual budget. So they didn't say how much that would be. Some budgets in a tight budget year could be 0, it could be more. It's going to be determined on an annual basis as part of the budget process.
What was their logic? Have they had trouble having people be on the board because there was no compensation, or is there some other legal reason why they want us to be compensated?
There was no legal reason for compensation. One member suggested that it could be used for people who have to pay for childcare in order to serve, or other, for maybe an adult care for an aging parent, or some other reason, cost incurred.
So they want to encourage a diverse set of people, and they don't want to have it keep people out because of cost.
Correct.
I think it might be an equity. I mean, those sound like it's sort of an equity issue, making it available for
Sure.
anyone who's available, who's willing to serve, who may otherwise be
Yes.
unable to. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
I think you should serve out of duty for these boards. And I don't think we should spend taxpayer money on us coming to a meeting. So,
I think that's a
What if it was
a
20
level
bucks?
of privilege that
I mean,
not
would
everybody
your,
has.
Would your feeling be even if it was $1? Because I would agree with you if it was $1,000, but if it was, I don't know,
I think that's a
enough
level
for a
of,
babysitter, I'd probably be okay with it.
I think that's a level of privilege not everybody has.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this. Has anybody said they want to serve and can't because they have children they can't get care for?
I've brought my
adults?
5-year-old and my
Yeah.
boys here. I don't know what the, and I will continue to do so if I need to, but I don't know what.
You'd almost have
Folks,
to. You'd
I don't
almost
know
have
what
to go back
folks-
and ask the last 3 mayors and say, did you ever ask someone? And they said, I really just can't. I don't have.
Not
time."
even ask the mayors. Would someone not have put in
yeah.
a recommendation? Would
Yeah.
someone not have applied because
Yeah.
they would not even have thought to inquire that it was
Yeah.
compensated, one,
Sure.
and two, learning that it wasn't compensated would not apply.
Got it.
Again, I'll come back to my own situation. I will continue if I need to bring my boys, but. If it were a matter of this was something that this board had an issue with, that, bringing my children with me if I need to, I wouldn't be able to serve on this board. My husband and I both, work, and sometimes we are out of town, and so we have to do that. So I would have to pay for a sitter.
Yeah.
They're not all old enough to be home. I am in a position where I can afford to do that, but not everybody is,
Yeah.
and that should not prevent someone from being able to serve. And that's me having young children, but there are also families who are caring for an aging parent and who are unable to do the same thing. So I think for me, I appreciate the addition. I think it comes back to a level of equity. It may be something that it sounds like it's optional and not even in tight budget years. It sounds like it may not even be offered, but I think it's a pretty nice benefit that the council would like to consider offering to open up the opportunity to serve for more folks to serve.
Well, I guess we can move on to the next amendment. So the next 2 amendments are requested by planning staff. The first of planning staff's requested amendments is to add the use hotel or motel as permitted in the neighborhood business zoning district, B1, and adjust the supplemental standards that are associated with that use. So neighborhood business zoning is typically found in commercial areas, usually along main roadways. And so currently, our supplemental standards for hotel motel are, to be honest, quite odd and antiquated, and so we're proposing to strike those standards. They're really not necessary, given the rest of the standards in the UDO. And then what we are proposing is that in the B1 and B2 districts, the following two standards would apply. No more than 75 guest rooms for lodging shall be provided. The intent there being to get it more of a boutique hotel style, not, a towering, 150-room hotel, but something smaller and more in context with the area. And that all guest units shall be reached from an interior corridor versus having external doors, getting more at the aesthetics and the appearance of the use. Any questions on that amendment?
And this does not mean Airbnbs and those things, correct?
It does not. This is, true commercial hotel establishment.
Has there been any concerns about or questions about this coming before the board?
This particular item? Well, as part of our downtown plan, there was a suggestion that there be a boutique hotel in downtown, and there's no restriction on the size. And so we want to make sure that all development that occurs is in context with the area, no matter if you're in downtown or elsewhere. And so that 75 room is a pretty consistent benchmark in other places for what you find as a boutique hotel. And so that's why the number's suggested.
Thank you for the context.
And finally, this is more of a cleanup, so to say. So when we amended the process for master subdivision plans a year and a half, 2 years ago or so, we basically moved that review authority from Planning Board and Town Council to the Technical Review Committee, since there was no authority of the Town Council to deny the subdivision at that point. And so we missed this section, which is dealing with the substitution of fees in lieu of public improvements, and there are still references to the planning board in this section which need to come out. Town council still has to approve these fees in lieu, but there's no, we need to remove the planning board from that paragraph, essentially. Any questions on that item? And planning staff is recommending approval of the amendments, and we can move on to discussing the vote now.
I'm going to make a suggestion that we move forward with amendments 3 and 4, because I don't think there's any issues on there. I think there's other discussion on amendments 1 and 2, just put them separate.
So would you like a motion to approve amendments 3 and 4 without change?
That's where I think
It'd be clean, and we could clean that. Is that okay? If we do 2 separate, or maybe
So-
3? Or would you just like one
Excuse me,
motion that
that's-
includes everything?
Well, because just the way this document is, I don't have room to write a whole motion with a bunch of different caveats, and we're only doing this and that. So we probably need to change this so that it's easier for them to do. I only heard one concern, and I've already written this so that it would work if you approved all of them with the exception of 212B5 planning board membership, and then down here, approval of the amendments with the following conditions. Recommendations keep the terms at 3 years and number of terms at 3 consecutive terms.
That
Unless
sums
there's
it up.
unless there's something else.
Yeah, so in
that
a
you want
sense,
to
we're
change.
saying yes to everything else.
Yes.
Yeah, although I don't like the compensation.
Yeah.
I think we should serve out a duty to civic duty, and we shouldn't be compensated and spend taxpayer dollars on people that want to volunteer.
But and I respect that, and so, and I heard Tina, and I agree that there might be someone who might not even ever apply, or might be asked and not serve because they have a difficulty. We would never hear about
But
it.
her case is, if, 1 year there's no money and the next year there is,
Yeah,
if they can't
yeah.
do it when there isn't money, then we got a situation, they don't
Well,
know, we don't know what the budget is.
Yeah, but I would love to see that, because let's say we had somebody on the board and they dropped out because the budget, we had been compensating them enough for a
And they have to
babysitter, let's say.
resign.
And then we said, the budget's tight this year, we're getting rid of that, and 2 people on the board dropped out, that would be a pretty clear signal. Next time you do the budget, think about this, right? So
Yeah,
I was
right.
going to suggest that to honor where you're coming from is to say there ought to be a dollar limit per meeting. And I'm just going to throw out there $25, and that way there is some compensation. It's enough for a babysitter. By the way, I haven't paid for babysitting in 20 years, so help me. Maybe $25 is not enough for me. But so tell me, if you are in the habit of hiring a babysitter, what would be a typical meeting babysitter fee?
I mean,
$50?
I think $50. Would
I
be
mean, we've had 20-minute
But
meetings and we've had 4-hour
Right,
meetings.
right,
So
right.
so I'm gonna suggest that we say limited by $50, no more than $50 a meeting. That way, no one's gonna get rich. We're not really sucking down the town's scarce financial resources, but yet we do try to make it for someone who isn't in the position we're in.
And I think I would open it up to those who are concerned. What other proposals would you put forth to allow for someone who would be unable to serve due to a financial concern? What other
In lieu of compensation.
in lieu of compensation? What other suggestions
Like an
would you?
expense reimbursement, is that what you're
What
thinking?
what sort of suggestions would you
Yeah.
put forth?
Yeah, if you felt more comfortable with an expense reimbursement where each of us, if we had a babysitter, let's say we put it in, or an elder sitter, and we put that in as an expense that would be a valid expense that would be reimbursed, that's not compensation. And it probably wouldn't be all of us, it might only be one.
And I would go back to saying,
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be necessarily a babysitter. Maybe it's
Uh-huh.
transportation getting
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's gas. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe
I
it's an
think
Uber.
that just all overcomplicates this whole issue.
Well, that-
We've been,
Right.
for years, we've had no compensation, and the boards have been very,
for years, have you had someone who's walked in here with a 5-year-old?
You're the first I've seen.
And I walked in here with my 5-year-old because my husband was out of town and I can't leave him at home.
Yeah, and you didn't want to.
And my option would honestly be to not be able to serve on this board
Mhm.
if I
or get a sitter.
or get a sitter, but I have that privilege. So what happens when someone doesn't have that privilege? So again, I hear you on the concerns for and other. I don't want to. I hear the concern for not wanting to spend taxpayer dollars. I am proposing that we want all voices of anyone who lives in this community represented on this board and on all of our boards. And if indeed we don't know if there are issues where someone doesn't even apply to serve because they are unable to, I'm open to other suggestions for allowing that to happen. This may be something that nobody ever uses, but the fact that the town is committing to, we want to ensure that that a financial hardship, a financial difficulties does not allow someone from serving, I think is a huge step forward for our town.
I think we need a motion to figure out what people think.
I can't see spending gas money or something, giving gas money. The town ain't but, 12 miles end to end?
Mm-hmm.
You can cycle that and it not be an issue. I've
It
done
is right now.
I've done it. The babysitter thing, I mean, I don't know. You might miss one meeting because someone's out of town. It doesn't stop you from absolutely not serving.
The last meeting
There's plenty
I-
of volunteering opportunities in the town.
The last meeting that I had to bring my 5-year-old to was a pretty important meeting that I would not have wanted to miss.
Okay, but that would be your decision to say, I don't want to miss it, versus we don't have a quorum and can't move forward.
And that is not allowing me to fulfill the duties of this position. The way I, as a volunteer, right, because I am volunteering my time, the way I, as a volunteer, would want to serve. I'm not asking to be compensated for serving. I'm asking for an equity to allow for folks who would not be able to, yes, I understand the town is 12 miles, so you can bike here, whatever. But, for those options. For those options.
Can we table one of the amendments? Because I'd like to talk to Mayor Gilbert and maybe some of the previous mayors and just see if they've ever had somebody.
Look at how long the next meeting is. You have 30 days to consider, and then they can move forward without your recommendations. So
I think we should give them back the context of what we're saying. But it's not clear, only 3 or 4 of us have said anything. So what do you guys think? What do you think?
I don't really see that it really is necessary. I mean,
To compensate,
Yep.
okay?
But she does have a valid point.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Just-
I do see the point, but in the grand scheme, I don't believe so.
Yeah,
I
I
would-
don't care about being compensated, but for some people that might need it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
So
would
you
like
can-
to note
so
that
you
I'm
can-
the
so you
only
can-
woman on this board that is currently posing a question to the gentleman on this board.
Yeah.
Just want to make that
Well,
note.
I was going to point out that I've only been on for about 3 years, and I think we've only had 2 women. Is that, but at least half the residents of this town are women, probably more than half. So what, is that because women tend to be the primary child care givers in our society, and therefore they don't apply because they just assume, well, I can't do that, it's 4:30 in the afternoon, I got kids, right? So you have convinced me that it would be good. You have convinced me that compensation doesn't feel right, and I don't feel like I need to be compensated. So that's why I came back with maybe an expense reimbursement of a limited amount. Feels better to me. I see a couple heads nodding. I'm just trying to find a middle ground.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we should. I'm going to make a motion, and you can help us word it correctly. That we send the sense of this piece back to town council and say we're uncomfortable with the term compensation. We would be more comfortable with expense reimbursement limited to no more than $50 per meeting.
And is that going to be just for elder or child care? I mean,
Well,
putting any gas
again,
money is
I
ridiculous.
was getting real detailed, and you were like, you're killing me. So I would just keep it super simple and say up to $50 of expense reimbursement.
To
Let the
attend,
town
to-
figure out what that means.
to attend the meeting. Or
Yeah,
I have no idea what the
Yeah.
compensation.
And I think if we gave that feedback to the town council, then it'd be interesting to see what they do with it.
I
right?
agree.
Then I look at it now, you're complicating the finance
Yeah.
department and
Absolutely.
expense reports and all that, and I don't see the value of
Yeah.
that.
But
Which
here's,
is- which
but
is, I think,
here-
is how
here's
we
my
ended up with
last
the
pitch, and then
compensation.
we can get off this if you want to move on, Chair.
No.
Is that if we told the town council kind of the summary of what we just said
Mm-hmm.
in that motion, then they can, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Or they can think it and say, yeah, we were thinking that too. And then they might say, yep, we're going to make that consistent for all the boards. And of all the boards, we might end up with 2 or 3 people. But at least we'd have a more diverse 2 or 3 people than we might otherwise have. And then so that way, it's only 3 people putting in expense reports to the town. You know, let's say. So that's my motion for that piece. And then I think you already captured the part of the motion for the other piece.
That's not a motion.
It's not a, I don't, yeah, we didn't get
Do you want to read our motion, complicated as it is?
so,
I don't have any. That was way too much. So, I mean,
Okay.
So we're gonna limit it to a reimbursement plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so so I'll try some language. So that, back to the town council, we recommend approval for all these amendments with 2 exceptions. One is the term limit, one you already wrote. Number 2 is we are uncomfortable with the concept of compensation for our board, and we would recommend that all boards be, instead of compensation, have a up to $50 per meeting reimbursement for valid expenses necessary to attend the meeting.
Mark, I just think you're opening it up for them. People are going to say, oh, you know what? I need some extra money, and I'm going to say I just needed some expenses.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just think
Yeah.
you open it up to.
I bet we have I bet we have somebody in this town, in the structure that approves expense accounts.
I was going to
right?
say, I think that there's a structure in this town that
Yeah.
approves
By the way,
expense
I don't think
reports.
this will be it. I think if we send this feedback to the town council, they'll go, oh, can of worms. So maybe they just back off,
Mix it,
right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they say, hey, town administrator, figure out how to work this. Right?
I'm curious to know as to why they thought it was a good idea in the first place.
Well, I think.
I might go back to equity.
I think
I might go back
it'd be
to
good
you
to
have
ask them, and I'll
one
mention it's
woman-
Tina's reason.
So-
That
One
you,
woman
somebody
sitting
on the
on
town
this board
council was
yeah.
worried about diversity and maybe inclusion of people that may not feel like they can.
But you adjusted. Let's say your argument is you wouldn't serve, but you just adjusted. You found a.
My argument is I also have a lot of privilege.
Yeah.
Oh, but if
I have a
you-
lot of privilege. A lot of people don't. I have a lot of flexibility. I can leave work when I need to. I am comfortable bringing my children. that
But leaving work is, if you can't leave work, that
Right,
doesn't
that
compensate
doesn't
somebody.
compensate.
it does if you were unable to leave work to
Sure.
if you're unable to walk away and take the time off to do that. But that's a whole nother thing. I'm specifically saying I recognize and I understand the amount of privilege I have to be able to sit here in this seat, once a month with you all and read the materials. And there are single parents who may want to serve on this board or any other board and who are unable to because they can't get compensation.
Yeah.
They are not going to pay a babysitter
But
to be
then
here.
that's their choice.
It's their personal choice. That's like saying,
That's not the,
I can't,
Yeah,
I
but
want
it
to coach
doesn't
my
serve
kid
our
in soccer
town to
in the
have-
town of Apex,
Yeah.
but can't because I got to work. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't coach.
Mhm.
I don't see the difference.
I'd like
Okay.
to, like I said, just table it and get some feedback from the mayor. Did you know, has there been people that you've talked to in your,
Mhm.
Again, so I am actually incredibly familiar with I can actually tell you I just met with the School of Social Work, and there are many folks, the School of Social Work both at NC State and at UNC. I just met with 2 classes, and there were many folks who were asking, how do you do this? How do I do this? This is something I absolutely want my voice heard at various boards. I had no idea that there were these boards. How do I do that? And when you come back to, I have a parent I have to take care of, I have a child that I need child care for, they may not apply because of those reasons, and we get a less diverse board because of it. And I would argue that doesn't benefit our town, having less diverse voices at this table.
I agree.
I don't think we don't have a diverse board. I think we have a very diverse board.
I have a lot of privilege sitting here. I do not represent every black woman that lives in this town. I represent one, I represent a subset of parents who live in this town. I don't represent all of the diversity, and we don't represent all of the diversity living in this town. And I think that any effort to get us there, I think this is a very small effort. Any effort to get us there, I would honestly propose much more, but that is not up for debate. But I could give you many studies on why people do or do not serve both an elected office and also volunteer boards, and how that plays into the lack of representation and gender equity. But we can table this. I'm happy to move to table this if you'd like.
So Diane, do we have time between the 30 days to table that particular item before?
There's not, but I suspect that the council's not going to want to hear it without a recommendation. So.
Yeah. See, I don't think we should do nothing and tell them nothing. I think we should give them feedback and say, we couldn't come to agreement on the compensation, a lot of difference of opinion. So we're not taking a position with compensation. Or we can say, we're not comfortable with compensation, lots of discussion, want to have a discussion.
So
Right?
what we've done in the past when we have the reasons stated for the opposing votes or vice versa, so that the town council has the information of why members voted against a proposed UDO amendment. So they're still hearing the why. That's one option. I'm not, pushing one particular option or another.
You said you don't want to break out the amendments into 4
You
separate.
can do whatever you like. It's just, it makes it's a little bit harder, but
I think
you
it'd
do
be
whatever
easier
you
to
like.
just, I think we got 2 amendments that we all agree on. We got one that we'd like to make a change on, and we got one that we've got
No agreement.
no agreement on, so we need to have a vote.
I need another paper.
Do you-
I already wrote one up the way that
Okay.
y'all were going, so
Yeah.
it's.
Well,
Do you have one?
Okay, so just Robert's
No.
Rules of Order.
He just
So-
said he wants to do 3.
So I made a motion that she kind of captured. She might want to read it back. I can summarize if you want. I think we should vote on that, and if it fails, then someone else should make an alternate motion, and we vote on that, and see if we can get something we get a majority on, then get that back to the town council. So my motion was, we approve everything in these 4, but except for the term limits, we want to leave them as is. And for compensation, we're not comfortable with compensation. We'd like to be a $50 per meeting limit on valid expenses that somebody in the town administration would say those are valid.
I like that. I don't feel like there was agreement on that piece.
No, I'm just making a
Oh,
motion.
okay,
I'm
got it.
not
I got it.
suggesting we're in agreement.
Okay,
I just want
I
to
got
make a
it.
motion.
So we have a motion. Do we have a
I'll
second
second that.
for that?
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh.
All right.
Did you capture all that?
I
We
did.
voted.
Yeah.
Let me just read it to
Yeah.
make sure that
Yeah.
it's, because he added a little bit, the second rereading of it. But,
Nice work.
so recommend approval with exception of 212B5 Planning Board membership. The recommendation is keep terms at 3 years and number of terms at 3 consecutive terms. And amendment number 2 in staff report, which is the easiest way I could do that because there were a
Yeah.
bunch of different sections. Recommendation is for an up to $50 per meeting reimbursement rather than compensation.
Yay.
Is that okay?
Good enough. And then they got to work off the details.
I made them.
Because that's not what they were thinking, obviously.
You just
They
said
would have said
that. Very good work.
And that was unanimous, I think.
That was,
Super.
yeah.
Okay,
What a
thank you.
deal.
I think there was conversation about
Kinda leaving it
reimbursement
open.
and that got changed.
If not, then they will. Now they will.
So just, I think Amanda was trying to interrupt, but y'all
Oh,
kept
sorry.
going. So at the actual meeting, the suggestion was for reimbursement for childcare, and I suggested that it would not only be easier just to do a flat,
Uh-huh.
everybody gets the same for record-keeping purposes, but
Yeah.
also it would be an equity thing, whether it was a parent or a
Someone that gets paid an hourly rate, hourly wage and wouldn't get paid.
That's not salary, that can't just say, oh, I'm gonna leave work early today. They actually lose money by leaving
Right.
work early. So that was me.
You're trying to simplify
So
it.
you
Well, that was-
basically
yes.
put them back kind of where they were.
Okay.
That's good to know.
Good to know.
Very good to know.
Thank you for not biasing us early.
Yeah, well, and,
seriously.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's going to be interesting for us and I don't know who's gonna be in charge of figuring out who gets reimbursed and for what, but hopefully not us.
Somebody.
Hopefully in
Somebody in
finance.
Legal or
who
finance.
we never meet.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's it. I need a motion.
I
So
move.
move.
Second, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Why is that always the easiest motion to get?
Everybody wants to-